You are watching the Jennylyn Show, and I'm Jennylyn, your host. And tonight, I have another interesting, fascinating guest to share with you. In light of all the security issues that we're struggling with in our universe right now, I'm very excited to have this gentleman here with me, Mr. Roger, or Dr. Roger Weissinger-Baylon, and he is the CEO of the Center for Strategic Research Decision. Is that correct?
Center for Strategic Decision Research, but close.
Thank you so much for being here with me. It was a long name and I was trying really hard to remember it.
You did very well.
So, where do we begin?
Well,
I know that you're sponsored by NATO and that you deal with research. So please tell us where you want to begin.
Well, I think one of the things we discussed about was that we've recently published a report sponsored by NATO, and we've submitted that to NATO and about 20 countries that participated in this conference that we held last year in Paris under the patronage of the French defense minister. And in the report, there are 40 contributions by military leaders, political leaders, academics, industry experts, covering various key aspects of global security and the current challenges. But that's more than we can perhaps discuss today, but maybe we can cover a couple of the most relevant security issues, maybe things that have been touched on or ideas that have been stimulated by President Trump's first foreign visit this year, the visit starting off with Saudi Arabia and then ending with visits to NATO and the EU and the G7.
So before we continue, I want my viewers to know this is not fake news. This is the real deal. So you listen to the news and you listen to a certain station, you hear something. You listen to another station and they're in complete, sometimes it feels like contradiction in what they're reporting. Tell us what the truth is in terms of security from your expertise.
Well, I'm going to give you my version of the truth, and that's maybe a good introduction to some points I would like to make about the sources of terrorism. The point I'd like to make is these ideas are commonly expressed, for example, by the Prime Minister of France or in newspapers around the world. But they're at loggerheads with the current U.S. defense policy. For example, with the visit by Donald Trump to Saudi Arabia, which is the launching point for his visit to Europe, Saudi Arabia was announced as our great ally in the region.
Yes.
Yet Saudi Arabia.
Is that true?
Well, they certainly are an ally in the standard sense, but they're also the home of Salafism and Wahhabism, which is the extreme brand of Islam that is behind the 9/11 attacks on the World Trade Center, by Al-Qaeda against us in Afghanistan. They're behind ISIS in Iraq and in Syria, and also against terrorism in Europe and globally. So this is our official ally in the region, yet that ally is propped up and maintains its power by its support for Salafism, which is a very extreme brand of religion. So that's something that I would consider to be a fact. All those issues are all those ideas are widely accepted in international meetings, yet nonetheless there's a tendency for government officials to avoid the word radicalism, and especially to avoid the words such as Salafism and Wahhabism, which are the official religion of Saudi Arabia.
So is it a good idea that we're sending ammunition, we're selling all this ammunition to these countries?
Well, that's the choice that governments have to make, and I would prefer that governments be more explicit about why they've made these trade-offs, because yes, there are reasons to, for example, to support a country like Saudi Arabia. For example, for a long time, Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states were very important as a source of oil.
Right.
But that's gone away a little bit because now there are competing sources of supply. But still, oil is still important. Then there's the issue of investments. The Gulf states are very rich, and they make investments in Europe, in the U.S., and globally. And in the case of austerity, which is a program in many countries, where do you get investments? If you can't get them internally, then you're open to getting them from countries that have them. This is so extreme that, for example, in France, under the Sarkozy government, they made an amazing decision, which was to give Qatar the ability that no French citizen have, which is to invest in real estate with no capital gains tax. Well, this is such an advantage that they're pushing aside French companies, and they're rapidly acquiring large parts of the Champs-Élysées and the most expensive real estate in places like Cannes. That's a measure of maybe how desperate some countries are to attract external investment.
Right.
Then there's the issue of, you mentioned, of arms sales. And with the low defense budgets in Europe for over a decade, the Middle East is seen as one of the few viable markets for arms. And who else is going to buy $110 billion of arms from the U.S. other than Saudi Arabia? And then there's a final argument that's made in favor of a friendship and alliance with Saudi Arabia, is the hope that they would be part of an alliance with us against ISIS, and they would make a military contribution. I think that remains to be seen how effective that such a contribution would be.
So you've been involved with your organization for how many years?
This is our 34th year.
Wow.
And yeah.
So you're really on the inside of all these, what's really going on. I'm so thrilled that you're sitting here with me.
Thank you.
What do you see happening when we send, from your experience, when we're sending weapons to some of these countries that are our allies, and they have the fundamentalists that support the other side of the fence in terms of threatening our safety around the world? Do you think when we sell these arms to these countries, they can end up in the hands of the wrong people?
Well, I would, in my personal view, they're already in the hands of the wrong people, because they're going to use them to suppress their own populations and the populations of neighboring countries. And I think there are some indications that no sooner had President Trump left Saudi Arabia that there were beginning to be oppressions of the political opposition in some countries in the region. I'm not an expert on that, but that's my impression.
That's kind of scary, because I always wonder where the people like ISIS, where they get their weapons.
I don't think that any of these countries would deliberately give weapons to ISIS, but what they do is they provide a religious belief system. Mm-hmm. And ISIS has essentially the same religious belief system as that of the ruling power in Saudi Arabia. And I think that General Mattis is making a big mistake if he thinks he can eliminate ISIS, which is his stated goal, because ISIS is true. It pretends to be a caliphate. It desires to be a state. That's sort of their power. But fundamentally, ISIS is a belief system. And eradicating a belief system is especially difficult to do when it's massively funded by the Saudis and the Qataris that build mosques all over the world that promote this radical branch of Islam. And in addition to the massive funding, there's actual involvement of Saudi ministries all over the world. I believe almost every ministry would have a religious affairs department that would be involved in, if appropriate and if possible, spreading their brand of religion, their extremist brand of religion, all over the world. So it's really making a deal with the devil.
Sounds like it. Really sounds like it. So over the years that you've been involved with NATO, somehow they don't seem as united anymore. Am I correct in making an assumption like that? And if it's true, why do you think? Because our president's last visit, he accused some countries of not paying their dues. Could that be one of the reasons why they aren't seemingly united like they used to be?
Well, all U.S. presidents have always accused other countries of not paying their full share. What's different this time is that did not occur in the halls of NATO. it occurred openly and publicly, and in a rather
shamefully,
in a rather aggressive and brutal way.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it was not accompanied by the standard reassurances that, despite the insufficiency, or that's our view, insufficiency of defense investments by our allies, despite that insufficiency, we would always be behind them 100% to defend them from a Russian threat, for example. And it was notably absent from President Trump's visit. That assurance was notably absent. So there was a combination of two factors: the lack of assurance and the public attempt to humiliate and embarrass our neighboring countries.
Shame.
Shame, yes.
That's the word. That's what I felt when I watched it. So why aren't they paying their dues?
Well, I think that, well, first of all, they're not dues, and there's no obligation to pay the dues. There's just an encouragement for them to do so. They don't have any legal obligation to do so. President Trump has said that they have an obligation. That's just totally ridiculous, and everybody knows that's totally ridiculous. But he has a Twitter audience that listens to that kind of thing. But serious people, neither in the United States nor any other country, would take that seriously.
So,
but the answer to your question is, the reason they don't pay their dues is they can get away with it. And they have chosen a policy of cutting budgets. They've cut social budgets as much as they dared to. But at the same time, they want to have long vacations. They want to have health care in most of these countries. And so that, if you make the calculations, you end up with a small military budget.
But you have a healthier population.
Much healthier population with longer life expectancy, and in many cases much happier people.
Yeah, we need some of that here.
I think we do. That's why Bernie Sanders has been pushing for such things.
The horizon is looking bleak at the moment.
Yes, it's not looking good.
And I'm very concerned. I'm someone who's for the underdog. And we are really under right now.
Yes.
Hopefully it will change.
Yes.
From your experience over the years, doing what you do, you have been meeting with heads of states worldwide over the 38 years.
At one time, we had a moment of glory when we were hosted by heads of state, and many heads of state came to our workshop. Our current profile is more modest.
Oh, and what's
well,
caused the change?
It's more at the ambassadorial level. I think what's caused the change is that one time the Eastern Europe was opening up. And we were there at the right time. They were able to play a role in opening up NATO and the EU to Europe. And the countries that hosted us first, the president of Poland, the president of the Czech Republic, those countries got into NATO very soon. And so the rumor spread was the way you got into NATO was you invited our workshop to NATO. And then once you're in NATO, you could get into the EU. That wasn't true, but that was a word that many people thought was important.
So you went to Stanford.
Yes.
And what did you study that led you down this path?
Well, Stanford was my third degree. I went to MIT, where I got a bachelor's degree and then a master's degree, and then I went to Stanford, where I ended up studying decision-making and artificial intelligence. And then I taught at universities in the U.S. and Canada, and we worked with the U.S. Navy on decision-making by naval commanders at sea and developing organizational models for that, and that led to the first two workshops.
I'm fascinated.
Thank you.
I have been by a lot of the people who have come on my set, and I feel so privileged that you people take the time to come here and let me ask you questions. And hopefully I ask the right questions.
You're very good at it.
Well, thank you very much. I needed that plug. So you, over the years, have clearly made a difference in many people's lives and in the world. What was it like when you met in the past with the heads of state compared to now? Clearly now you aren't meeting with the same caliber of people, and you've explained why not. But how do you see what you're doing? What are your projections for the future?
Well, I would think during the first years it was the center of the Cold War, and there was a feeling of stability. Mm-hmm. That the Russians were our enemy, but there was some suspicions that they really weren't seeking to cause any kind of serious conflict, and they were maybe even hoping that things would get better. And then, of course, there was a period after that well, maybe I would interrupt. We had some pretty bad ideas in those times. I remember in our early workshop having diagrams on the wall of Russian troops in columns invading Germany, and our allies shooting nuclear artillery in the center of Germany at the Russians, and them shooting back. It really wasn't a very good idea.
Right.
But those were just games. And then there was the tremendous excitement of the fall of the Berlin Wall, and then the movement towards opening up of the world to a period of hope and ambition, feeling that we were going to be friends. The war was maybe behind us, and
yes.
it was going to be something really to look forward to.
What do you think is the reason why Russia is such a hot topic? I mean, they clearly are. I don't want to say feared because I can't speak on behalf of other people, but they're clearly not camaraderie or comrades. And every time they're mentioned, it's always regarding some kind of secrecy or controversy. From your expertise, what do you think is the reason for that?
Well, I don't know. In my environment, there would normally be a formal environment where you'd have maybe a Russian ambassador
yes.
present and
yes.
Ambassadors from other countries. And each of them, every country would be projecting the official propaganda of its country.
Yes.
So Russia would be saying, why are you building missile defenses? Missile defenses, that means our nuclear deterrent is less capable. This is a threat to us. The U.S. would be saying, and the Allies would be saying, no, it's not a threat against you. We just want to be defending against Iran, for example. So this would be the kind of sterile conversations, but they did have a value because in some cases we were having, for example, in our events, let's say the Deputy Prime Minister of Georgia discussing with the Russian ambassador about their invasion, and some benefits occurred from that discussion. For example, one of our participants suggested that Georgia should make a pledge to not take a military action against Russia in the hope of resetting the frontiers. Does that give you some feeling of how things have changed?
I just wonder if they're to be feared. Sometimes I just wonder, but then I am not involved in the political arena.
Oh, you mean whether Russia is being treated fairly or not?
Yes, if we should be fearful of them.
Oh, fearful of them?
Yes.
Well, I think we should, because they have 1/17 of our military capability, of our military budget, 1/17. That's not very much yet. They have interfered with our election. They have polarized our country. They have caused divisions so great that millions of people may lose health care. They've caused our allies to lose confidence in us. They're using the same means against other countries. We're not alone. We're the country that suffered the most, but they're doing the same thing elsewhere in the world. So they're with a very, very modest budget, an insignificant budget, they're causing enormous disruption.
I don't get it. I mean, they seem like they just are bent on making America a stage where they're like little brats behind the scene, poking around and causing so much trouble and almost trying to derail our system. It's almost like they're trying to say, look how stupid these Americans are. And it's really sad because, you know, as an American, I want to be proud of my country.
Sure.
And I want to be proud of the people that rule my country. And I've traveled since our recent election, and you get grief from everybody, you know, like,
sure.
What did you guys do, kind of thing. And
yeah.
It's just really sad.
Yes.
Because everyone wants to be proud of their country and the good that it's doing.
I have a recent quote here, if you allow me to read my text.
Please.
This is by former U.S. Secretary of Defense William Perry, speaking a little bit before this crisis with Russia developed. And keeping in mind the disorder that they've created and the lack of confidence in our allies, this is before that time, the probability of a nuclear calamity is higher today than it was during the Cold War.
Wow.
Now, imagine this kind of context, and then adding on to that the instability in the U.S. and the lack of confidence and trust that we have with our allies. So it's a very dangerous situation.
And the division amongst our people.
Yes.
So this is a book you have written, and it's called Global Security and Crisis. and I'm just going to hold it up so that my director can get it.
Thank you.
And so how is it going to benefit people to read this book?
I think most people would get bored pretty fast. There's an introduction that I provided of key points that I discussed with NATO before including them in there, which is only 2 pages. And some of those points are points that I've discussed and that maybe NATO didn't agree to, but they allowed me to say that. And this is available for a free download from our website.
And what is the website?
www.csdr.org.
Okay. Now, as always, when I'm getting smart, because that's how I feel when I sit here speaking to someone like yourself, the time flies. I want to make sure that you leave everything with my viewers that you want them to know before we wrap this up. I will let you take the interview over from here and say whatever you want to say that I haven't asked you.
Well, what I would say is that I'm thinking about this not so much in the context of the terrorist threat, but I think it would be nice if our governments would explain to the populations why it is that they're making certain trade-offs, why they're favoring Saudi Arabia instead of directly attacking the problem of the very, very scary religion that's at the basis of that government. There's also one thing that we didn't discuss, which was much discussed in our book, and that is the growing cybersecurity threat. And the main comment I would say about that is that everybody's vulnerable. The largest companies that there are, just randomly pick a name: Boeing, Coca-Cola, General Motors, Walmart. All these companies are vulnerable, just as our own country is vulnerable. And there really needs to be a massive increase in the amount of funds that are allocated to cybersecurity. And some people say 150%, some people say 200%. If you go beyond 200%, then there aren't enough people to hire, so you really have to get into universities and junior colleges and high school and start training people. And then I guess a final concluding remark is what really matters is the impact on people. For example, in cybersecurity, it's not so much the effect of losing money, but maybe if a hospital patient can't have an operation done, or if in Ukraine the part of the electrical grid goes down, that's a serious problem that we should be concerned about.
Well, we just saw it happen the other day in England, where they held a bunch of hospitals hostage, and they couldn't function. And you know, it's interesting because you never realize how much you depend on our computers now for the world. In the past, you got a paper book or you pulled a chart, but now these people can easily sabotage different parts of our lives because they know how to like you say, have these cyber attacks. So how does one protect themselves?
Well, the official story, you're referring to the WannaCry cyber attack, which has affected 150 countries, I think at least 100,000 organizations and 200,000 people. And Microsoft claims that if you have the latest version of their Windows software and all the updates, you're safe. But I've seen many people saying that that's not enough, but at least... Okay, you had a problem?
I had a problem, and I have Microsoft. So
oh my gosh.
Yes. In fact, one morning I woke up, and my television show, my website, had been sabotaged and taken over by a Turkish, looks like, I woke up and there were just war tanks and guns on my website.
My gosh.
And believe it or not, the same day, the police chief was my guest. And I don't know, they said I didn't have a secure enough password, and I went through a lot of stress to get my website back. So I learned then what they're capable of doing. And why my website, I couldn't figure out, because all I do is this. I'm not making such a huge difference in the world as you are. And so I couldn't understand why they would confiscate my website. But what would your advice be to like average person at home to protect their systems?
Well, I think that there are some things you can do, which is having the latest updates.
Okay.
And you've been advised by doing that, and using malware. Now, malware is not that antivirus. Using antivirus software, it's not that effective. But if you do these things, and of course, up until now, people who have Apple computers have done better than people who have Windows computers, and I don't get any compensation from Apple for saying that.
I hope they compensate you.
I hope so.
That's a huge plus for them. Well, you know, we are down to 2 minutes. What is on your agenda for the future with this, with your research?
Well, this is a big question mark because up until now we've depended on our close cooperation with the U.S. Defense Department, and now everybody in the world is wondering about what kind of country the U.S. is going to be and what our relationship is going to be with the world.
Has the new government affected your work in any way negatively?
Well, we'll see.
Oh my goodness. I really hope that they don't, because at the end of the day, we all want to be safe. Apart from the fact that we want to exist here happily and be like the Europeans and get long vacations and great benefits, you know, we want to be safe. Everybody in the world wants to be safe. And I'm so grateful to you that you've taken today to come and sit with me. I hope we covered everything.
We did a wonderful job, thanks to you, Jenny, and your great skills.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. And thank you to my crew and all of the efforts that everyone makes so that I can produce these shows. And I thank you so much for watching the Jennylyn Show. Remember, this is not fake news. And thank you for watching the Jennylyn Show. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jenny,
for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, it was my honor to have you here. It's really interesting to learn.